2016 release of Enderal Shards of Order was an innovation of its time in the Skyrim modding landscape, but that wasn't the Enderal of development. Now that half of my audience is gone, in 2019 Enderal received its first and foreseeably only piece of DLC or downloadable content, Forgotten Stories. A massive edition that was released as a free update and introduced the Steam installation of the game, a major milestone. DLC for a lot of players and critics is a touchy subject, and for good reason. Oftentimes DLC can feel tacked on, a grab for money, and a pointless addition merely to extend the life of a game past its prime, where the headlines are how large a new play area is going to be, rather than what exactly is going to be in that play area. However, what may be surprising is the sheer size of Enderal's DLC. Additions felt meaningful, with several new content-heavy quest lines, music, items, companions, and skill trees. And what's more surprising is that the DLC still retains the quality of the main game, which, if you haven't seen either of my last videos, I can say with full confidence sets a very high bar. Within this video, we'll briefly explore some of the content added within the DLC, starting with the mechanics and then moving on to the stories and characters. As I'm sure many of you understand, there are major spoilers ahead for all story-related content within the DLC. The Rhalata questline, Yuslan's quest, and the Dreamflower ending for the main quest will all be spoiled. If you haven't played through any of these, I highly recommend leaving and coming back after. Like last time, I will leave spoiler cards before moving in, but for now, you've been warned. In my last video, with regards to the story and the High Ones, I used a closed statement when speaking about their truthfulness to the player. In a discussion with commenter Paul Enan, he pointed out my statement, and while they never technically lied to you, they were biased by exclusion, though I am getting off track, was untrue. After going back through the conversation I was referring to with the High Ones at the temple, I discovered he was right.
Evolution. That is what they call it. Just as the lizard became a dragon, and the bird became a myra, their leader, Tharael thinks he is one of the emissaries, just like you. No, and neither is the old Aronthio. Korak considers himself a savior, chosen to guide humanity to a glorious future, but he does not understand that he is a victim of his own pride.
Telor Aranthiel and Korak are both emissaries, the Emperor and Messiah respectively. At least, that's what the wiki and in-game sources tell us. Thank you for commenter Paul Enan for pointing out that error. In the Forgotten Stories DLC, two new paths, or classes, were introduced, the Lycanthrope and the Phasmalist. Both are classes that root themselves in the handicraft skills, alchemy, and enchanting respectively, and both serve as additions to other combat styles, offering interesting gameplay mechanics to enhance your experience, although they both have their fair share of issues. In contrast to Skyrim's idea of a lycanthrope, where it's earned after joining the companions and after one slightly interesting first-time transformation blends into the background as another ability, Enderal treats lycanthropy as an alchemical tincture. Many ingredients within the base game were modified, as well as some new ones being added in order to contain the Wolf's Blood modifier. Combining two or more ingredients that share this modifier creates a Wolf Blood potion. Of course, the specifics of the potion will vary depending on the other ingredients used, but that is beside the point. Consumption of the potion will immediately transform the player into a werewolf for a limited time, depending on the player's own perk choices and alchemy skill. Now, the feeling of the transformation is on point. The sound effects of a muted explosion with the overtones of a wolf's howl echoing through the battlefield. As for the gameplay though, well, it is mostly the same as vanilla Skyrim. Running around like a big wolf, hacking and slashing with your claws, it's all there. However, there is more to it. For one, the system is integrated into Enderal's existing arcane fever, which, if you don't know what I'm talking about, part 1 of this series dives into that fever. As well, your lycanthrope is treated with such hostility by those in the cities that you are unable to be or stay transformed there until you unlock a perk which negates this. All potions used will be refunded. The exact strength of your werewolf is calculated from your alchemy level as well as a few other things, which creates an interesting dynamics with regard to the viability of lycanthropy in the late game. But these are both understood to be pieces in the puzzle of adding a new combat style into the game, and Sure A.I. went beyond this, adding a system of temporary augments to your werewolf through alchemical tinctures called chimica, which we will explore in a bit, and a permanent perk tree. The perk tree expands on the lycanthrope's attachment to alchemy, as well as making the transformations less dangerous, more powerful, and longer lasting. Altogether, already an improvement on the base vanilla system. But Enderal's lycanthrope system truly shines through with the chimica, a series of werewolf form enhancing potions which add or boost certain elemental resistances, elemental claw damage, and stealth. However, is lycanthropy a viable skill path to take against the tried and tested Standard 3? My answer? Yes. I wouldn't go into it expecting an insane amount of power from the get-go. Like all things in Enderal, it takes time to rank up to full power, which at max makes you a stealthy and incredibly durable wolf. Getting into it from the beginning requires vigilance when searching for proper alchemicals to use in order to create potions that you need to transform, which afterwards unequips you of all your items except any werewolf-specific amulets. As such, I wouldn't recommend adding it to a warrior or ranged loadout, but a mage may be better, though, as we will discuss, not a Phasmalist. The lack of any sort of follower in the base game of Enderal threw me through a loop at first. I loved the feeling of having the two companions with you, and the importance placed upon them being your only two companions, but it felt lonely not having someone to watch your back while exploring, which in Enderal can be a lifesaver. Once the expansion was released, I was excited to get into the Phasmalist role. The idea of being able to summon the souls of the deceased was enticing to say the least. In practice, the Phasmalist is interesting. The souls you summon come in 5 tiers, with a hidden 6th tier, as well as a new crafting station, which, depending on your enchanting, is used to create talismans that must be equipped, and then a separate power used to actually cast the summon. All of these souls are hidden across the map of Enderal, and upon getting all 20 of these souls, a secret incoming 21st soul is added to the player's inventory, the soul of Lorem Waterblade. The souls all come with inherent equipment and skills appropriate to their tier and soul class. However, the player can add and adjust these souls with further crafting, a system which can get very expensive very quick. When an apparition dies, a certain amount, dependent on perks, of Arcane Fever is added to the player. As Arcane Fever degrades the player's skill in tiers, it can be easy to see how much of a slippery slope this could end up being if the player is careless in their summoning. The souls are viable in their own ways. Higher tier souls obviously growing in health pools and strength, but the first tier souls can still be viable against stronger opponents, though more as a distraction. The seemingly deciding factor appears to be in the player's ability to manage their own soul's positioning on the field. The soul's unique ability to be cast anywhere a spell can land allows for some creative approaches to ranged opponents. The soul's AI is good enough and follows its orders given to it on creation. Offensive souls charge in, dipping, diving, and power attacking, cutting swathes through opponents, only to be shot dead in a few strikes. The defensive approach slowly, holding up their block and waiting for opportune moments to strike before turtling back up. Ranged and magic methods are just that, ranged and magic. And balanced? Well, just use one of the other 4. The souls are not just another type of companion, however. Through the perk tree, souls gradually become stronger. Enhancements to their strength and combat styles, as well as health, stamina, and magical pools can be made. The apparitions can cast any spell taught to them, granted they have enough magicka. They instantly regen a bit of health after any combat they survive, and the player can utilize an instant cooldown power to immediately return the apparition to their side. An ability which can easily be abused to lure enemies or come in clutch to save your apparition, and potentially yourself. They also come with the normal annoyances of most NPC companions, blocking exits, ruining cutscenes, and if not properly spec'd or utilized, get dropped by a throwaway strike. They're also a fairly expensive summon to cast, as creating the amulets and equipping your apparition requires specific resources as well as bone meal and ectoplasm. Yes, later in the spell tree there is a perk which allows corpses to be decomposed for soul gems and ectoplasms specifically for creating talismans and spectralizing equipment. It is locked behind quite a few other perks, making getting to it a costly run. All that being said, I played through as a Lycan Phasmalist, and it's easy to see where the synergy stops. Upon transforming into a Lycan, your equipment is immediately unequipped, which in turn means your soul talisman is unequipped, which means your soul is gone, which is an obvious problem. There is a class synergy between these two, in which your phantasm can go werewolf mode. It's not exactly useful, but it sure is fun at times. Both of these classes are supported by the 3 major branches. They are meant to be neat additions that add a new dimension to a tiresome style of play. It was my own fault for using both as the main class, and the argument that the review might be skewed in a certain direction can be made. However, I don't believe either class detracts from the game. An RPG is a game of choice, and 2 more options for how the game is played is far from a bad thing. I don't think it's controversial to say that the Rhalata questline was the flagship for the Forgotten Stories DLC. It was featured heavily in the main trailer and easily felt the most developed out of all content additions. However, the Rhalata questline had a long way to go to reach the main quest standards, but I don't think I'm alone when I say it reached and easily surpassed some of those standards. Of course, before I get into this part of the review too much, know that there are massive spoilers ahead, and like all things in Enderal, this story is best enjoyed as a fresh experience. The integration of the questline is simple enough. Perhaps not as smooth as some of the other questlines introduced in the DLC, but that's a topic we'll touch on in a bit. Entering into the Undercity, the player is prompted to go to the fighting pits to stake their claim as a capable gladiator, a nice nod to the beloved Oblivion arena. Though it's only after a few, admittedly difficult, fights that we meet our main guide and protagonist of the Rhalata questline, Tharael. A straight-to-the-point and harsh individual, more interested in furthering his own goals and caring about others, Tharael is a member of the Rhalata, a group of thugs and assassins who run the Undercity through an extortion racket. As I write this script, it is difficult for me to narrow down everything I want to talk about in regards to the story behind the Rhalata questline and why it pulled me in. As well, I'm already beginning on the 8th page, so to conserve time, I'll only be focusing on one theme and the subsequent motif. As with my previous video, I will break down the theme and motif that I find intriguing in this quest to hopefully show in greater detail what makes this story tick. For those of you who watched my second video, this theme may be a familiar sight, and it being here shows an important lesson in writing, whether intentional or not. When it comes to adding on to a pre-existing world, steps must be taken to make the addition feel seamless. One of the ways Sure A.I does this is by tying the themes of the story together. Enderal has a unique feel to it. Adding on a DLC which deviates completely from the original themes would be jarring to say the least, and the DLC adds on to the theme of dreams in spades. It makes the DLC feel more like an expansion to the world rather than an expansion to the game. Now, touching on the appearance of dreams, it is pretty obvious throughout many of the conversations you have with the main suspects of the story, the father and Tharael, that both have very differing experiences. For the father, his dreams are his inspiration. They are his means of visualizing his goal, to ascend from the earthly form and attain something greater. The father's philosophy can be traced to transcendentalism, with influences from Henry David Thoreau, with his beliefs that most people are blind to what is happening around them and only doing what is absolutely required of him to live. Though, beyond what may be the simplest of inspirations, the father's beliefs begin to concentrate around evolving to a higher state of being, leaving this world and its materialistic nature behind for something greater. The motif of the mask adds to this, as it hides one of the most personal features a person can have, a face. The Rhalata make a point to hide most of their skin, and it makes sense. For an organization who wants to be released from their fleshy vessels, it's quite symbolic to hide their skin from view. In their eyes, a step on the way to becoming a god. As a slight tangent, even the language and model of the father expresses this wish to escape the traditional aspects of humanity, from utilizing the Skyrim female walk animations, though having a male model, to having an ambiguous voice which fluctuates from feminine to masculine at the drop of a hat.
You do indeed have something peculiar about you. Tell me, how do you feel about Brother Wrath, Tharael, as you call him?
To being referred to with both the female and male pronouns in the same sentence.
Father. Yes, our father. We never saw his face, you know. She always wore this mask, this terrible, scary mask.
With Tharael, unfortunately, it's difficult for me to speak about his role with the theme without getting into his character, so perhaps it's time to finally do that. Character design in Enderal, to echo my sentiments from my last video, is one of the reasons to play the game. In the main game, characters created a sense of intrigue for themselves and the world as a whole. They were embedded in the lore and had personalities and physical designs that made them stand out. They carried relatable burdens inspired by real-life occurrences that were adopted and altered to fit neatly within Enderal's world. Tharael is not an exception to this. A man who had to fight for everything since his birth. Orphan on the streets of the Undercity, he was taken in by another orphan by the name of Letho, the only source of kindness he could find. Brought to an orphanage, the two were inseparable until they were eventually taken in the dead of night, kicking and screaming, sold off by the matron of the orphanage to the Rhalata. Experimented on by the father, Tharael was tossed aside into a mass grave and assumed to be dead. Gathering his strength, he made his way out, and eventually back to the Rhalata. His only goal now to avenge Letho and kill the father. Tharael is brutal, and from the get-go, he wants you to kill a man named Collian, who, sparing you the detailed backstory, did some very bad things. Collian, after some investigating, is revealed to be nothing more than a lowly wretch who wallows in his own filth, a life wasted in guilt over what he had done. His cover name is Nilak, nothing more than an anagram of his true name. After some threatening, Nilak agrees to help you on the condition you let him go and not execute him. When all is said and done, Nilak has held up his end of the bargain. Still, though, Tharael wishes to kill him and go back on his word. And while you can attempt to change his mind, it won't stop him from killing Nilak. Brutality over mercy. Revenge. Tying up the loose ends, regardless of who or what the loose ends are or have done. I remember when I first ran through the DLC, feeling bad that I was unable to stop the death of a mentally compromised and guilt-ridden man.
No! I told you! So why are you not listening? Collian is dead! Don't you understand? He's dead, and Nilak buried him! Oh, no, he's sorry. Please don't hurt him. He will not raise his voice again.
I began to foster feelings of hatred towards Tharael for his dishonorable action, and even after reloading to check the other dialogue choice, I just discovered the outcome appeared to be the same. It was an infuriating feeling, but at the same time, trying to convince Tharael of the good path leads to a downward trend in your relationship status with him, and if you're not on his good side, how can you convince him to change his ways? Or at least, that's what the normal trend in video game relations teaches us to expect, to indulge someone's interests and intervene when necessary. Sure, the character may be angry at the moment, but they'll come around eventually. Tharael is a subversion of this expectation. Throughout conversations with him, it's like walking through a minefield blindfolded. At times where you may want to develop a relationship with him, something you may believe is constructive to say is rather destructive, and he'll let you know. For most wanting to play and interact with the characters, it feels off-putting. But whether you like it or not, he's sticking by your side, working with you, and eventually coming to accept you, if not as a friend, then at least as an ally. An intrinsic reward for the player who might have been slaving to appease Tharael, or just keep him level-headed. But still, it seems, even in your last tasks together, there is still a separation between the player and him. A man consumed by his drive for revenge. Another life is taken, and another loose end tied up. To get this far with someone only to have them turn and seemingly regress? It's aggravating. None of this journey was easy for Tharael, and the end proves just as difficult. Letho, his foster brother and savior, Tharael's motivation, is revealed to be the right-hand man of his greatest enemy, the father.
No, that's not true. Please, Letho, it's me. It's me. Tharael.
Another victim of the experiments, another husk, no longer the kind-hearted boy Tharael once knew. And perhaps to preserve that memory of who Letho was, Tharael kills Letho.
Monster you think I am, Tharael. I hope we can finally see that.
No!
And all is taken away. Everything fallen at his feet. Even if Tharael didn't know it at the time. The resulting battle with the father, should you have the heart to still side with Tharael, pits you against an ancient entity. And who could defeat an entity as powerful as the father? Is it even possible?
You disappoint me, Tharael. Anger has always been your biggest weakness. Now look at what you've done.
What? But we...
Do you really think 400 years taught me so little?
It seems not. And as you approach Tharael down the empty corridor, you see nothing but a husk. A shell of a man who gave everything for their mission and compromised every moral they told themselves they had along the way. Consoling words can only do so much.
I'm sorry for everything. Forgive me.
But it might not have to be this way. What if nudging to the moral side of the path truly could make a difference? What if, while he hates you, you can still teach him a lesson? And by offering a new path, rather than direct anger or refusal, one can show Tharael a new future. From everything I've just touched on, this piece of the DLC I'm about to talk about may seem underwhelming. While integral for the alternate ending, this quest is certainly much less substantial than the Rhalata storyline. However, the Yuslan quest trumps the Rhalata in a key regard: DLC integration. Yuslan is a relatively low-profile character up until the end of the main quest of the 2016 release. He has some moments with the player, but nothing defining, and while that may have something to do with setting up the twist, it does feel a little cheaty that we never really knew much about the man. And this shortish character quest might answer some questions we have. And yeah, while the quest was good, what truly took me by surprise was that on my first playthrough, I wasn't even aware I was playing DLC until I recognized a scene from the DLC trailer already 3/4 into the quest. For me, this blew me away. It's not often DLC is integrated to the point the quality, for better or for worse, is so on par with the main game that it's indistinguishable. This DLC begins after a meeting where Yuslan approaches you to ask if you'd be willing to speak alone. You then meet with him privately, and the DLC begins. It's perfection through simplicity. Comparing this integration to others in Skyrim modding, Skyrim itself, or even the Forgotten Stories DLC, it blows most integration efforts out of the water. Now, to be fair, Enderal does have quite the advantage in other mods, as well as Skyrim itself. Being more story-focused, it's able to accurately predict what the player is going to be doing at any time, while still being able to call on voice actors previously used for the project. But it's those advantages which create a gold standard, at least in my opinion, of DLC integration. The music in the base game was a treat to the ears. Some of my favorite tracks, like Deceptive Peace, Phoenix, and Northwinds. All are somewhat haunting songs that are wonderfully paired with a level design and characters creating fantastic backings to adventures. And for a DLC featuring the aforementioned list, the music that was paired with it, well, there isn't much to say other than to allow you to listen to it yourselves. Boss fights, character moments, bard songs, ambience, all of it wrapped into the package. Musical motifs in the form of a heartbeat and a melody mimicked across the tracks of the Rhalata music create a sense of connection while playing through the quest. As well, a new bard song, The Night of the Raven, sung by Laura Singer, incorporates new lore introduced with the DLC, helping stitch it further into the already existing world.
Listen, my child, and always remember the tale that struck fear in the hearts of so many. Summer it was, the day had just broken when a man found...
The Dreamflower ending for the Forgotten Stories DLC puts a Sure A.I twist on what one may consider to be a happy ending. Dubbed the secret ending, and for good reason, the list of requirements and correct choices that need to be made is incredibly extensive. The Dreamflower ending takes full advantage of all content added by the DLC. In a list, the ending requires, and spoiler ahead of course, 1. The completion of the Rhalata questline to a point for access to the Substance Decomposer. 2. At least one Dreamflower found during Yuslan's quest and then not giving it to Yuslan when he asks for it. 3. The recipe for the Dreamflower elixir from Yero's home in the quest Secrets. 4. A myriad of other high-level ingredients including a full Grand Soul Gem and a human heart. 5. The elixir being drank before the Fleshless quest begins, and 6. The catharsis ending being chosen when given the option. This all definitely creates a sense of exclusivity to the end, and one that can be accidentally messed up in a single click. But how does it compare to the original base game endings? First, a quick refresher. The first is the catharsis ending that I had just mentioned, where the prophet, you, sacrifice yourself, breaking the crystals powering the beacon for a chance to delay the cycle from happening, giving your companion a chance to run off and warn the rest of the world what is coming. It's an ending that demonstrates you believe there is still hope for this cycle of humanity, that if just given a second chance, people will do right. The second is the New World ending, in which the prophet and their companion escape to the city in the sky, where the prophet, untouched by time due to their undead nature, is allowed to reshape the next cycle of humanity as told by the Black Guardian. Perhaps you believe all is lost for this cycle of humanity, and regardless of what land you hail from, your fate is sealed. The only cure is a new world. The Dreamflower ending is like the Catharsis ending, where you still set off the nuclear warhead, which is the beacon, but by some miracle you survive and the companion you told to flee comes back to recover your body off of a hunch. However, This is all too good to be true, no? Being at the epicenter of a blast of pure, unfocused energy that turns an entire continent to rubble is a sure death sentence, right? Well, after Yuslan's expedition to gain his one last look, he takes time to explain the properties of the Dreamflower.
They're both wrong. Yes, the Dreamflower improves your arcane skills, but it neither makes you immortal, nor does it allow you to seamlessly jump between realities. Instead, it puts you into an eternal slumber. Do you understand? From the moment you drink it, you're asleep, trapped in a dream where things always go the way you want them to. An Elysium.
The potion we brew, if Yuslan is to be trusted, doesn't make us invulnerable to the blast. Instead, it whisks us to a dream where everything we wish to happen does. To those of you who have played Enderal, does it sound familiar? It makes sense then that when we awake in Al Rashim, in Kira with our companion after the blast, that even in the face of these insurmountable odds and a clear death sentence, it all may be too good to be true. In terms of the feeling of the ending, as I said in the beginning of this section, it feels right. The ending still retains the Sure A.I satisfaction I get when I finish a playthrough, even if I did grind the entire game in a weekend with no sleep. It didn't fail to still have a grim twist to what is otherwise people's most perfect ending that they described before the release of Forgotten Stories. And hell, while the ending may or may not be real,
what is reality anyway?
Forgotten Stories was, at least for myself, an entirely unexpected addition to Enderal. After my first playthrough in the summer of 2016 that changed my entire outlook on storytelling and its power, I was content to lie back and bask in what was. I knew the game was developed by an incredibly small team, and was offered at no charge. I had never heard of a mod ever receiving literal DLC and a Steam release. Updates, sure, but this was entirely new territory that seemed foreign to me. And, to say the least, I was impressed. The moment on my first raw playthrough, watching Tharael lean back off that cliff, needless to say my roommates had to deal with me venting to them about the entire questline. Forgotten Stories displays with what seems like a complete lack of effort the incredibly difficult task of incorporating DLC onto an existing game. The class mechanics offer interesting support roles to further specialize your playstyle. The stories are beyond what I would expect as additional DLC. No longer is there the tired method of bragging about new lands that are X time as large as the base game. Rather, they focus on expanding the actual game world that was presented at launch, with new stories revolving around throwaway elements of the base game, as well as fixing plot holes. A tactic I can only hope is replicated later on by larger game companies, and that no longer we will have Forgotten Stories. That evening in 2019, when I watched the trailer for the first time, I was beyond impressed. And that trailer inspired me to reach out to the Sure A.I team with a shot in the dark, to create something to thank them for the work they did. My subsequent interviews with Nicholas Samuel fueled my inspiration to create these 3 videos. And by the time the next supercontinent forms on Earth, who knows, I may have released my next video. But before that next video comes out, these 3 videos couldn't have existed without a plethora of people. So many have helped me in the creation of these videos in so many ways. My family has been able to offer help with my script, specifically my brother who works as a game designer, offering invaluable advice on the interior thoughts of a game designer and on general game theory. My roommates have watched countless drafts of the videos I've made, giving me a fresh set of eyes to tell me where my editing errors are. My professors offered me the perspective of those who literally have no experience with video games, giving me the advice on the readability of the script. Tons of online friends had to endure voice chats where I did nothing but read and reread my scripts to them. To everyone that had to put up with my ramblings about this game while having no experience in it themselves, I have nothing else to say but thank you. From the bottom of my heart, they deserve as much credit as I get for creating the videos. For without them, these videos wouldn't be nearly up to the quality standards that I hold them to. Lastly, for the few of you who are still watching, thank you. I had literally no expectations the videos would receive the attention they have, and the amount of people who comment on requesting the next video, it's uplifting to say the least. I can't stress how much you all mean to me, how much I enjoy reading all of your comments, and hearing your own thoughts on this amazing game. So to clumsily finish this video off, there's little for me to do but thank the Sure A.I team. For me, one of the many players of your game, you helped change my life. For every person who worked on this game, from project lead to temp QA tester, you all helped this project come together. Thank you so very much. And for the rest of you, until we next meet, continue your own story, and I'll see you soon.